Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this new video in which we continue our close reading of Dialectic of Enlightenment by Theodor, Adorno and Horkheimer. So, today we're gonna read the fourth section of the culture industry. So the last time we talked about how the culture industry kills off emotions by rendering them inoffensive through amusement. That's basically what the third section was leading to. It turns everything into an entertainment and thus robbing it of its revolutionary potential. And we also talked about how through the ideology of liberalism, the culture industry can also control and manufacture the needs of the consumer. And this fourth section is basically a continuation of that. From the start, they write, the more strongly the culture industry entrenches itself, the more it can do as it chooses with the needs of the consumers, producing, controlling, disciplining them, even withdrawing amusement altogether. Here no limits are set to cultural progress. Now that's very interesting, because, okay, like the culture industry produces, controls, and disciplines the needs of the consumers, but it can even withdraw amusement altogether when it fits its goals. And so what this means is that this is what we kind of talked about also in the last video. It is the ability for the culture industry to turn amusement into work, to turn it into a business, to turn it into a sales stock. Like amusement has, of course, revolutionary potential, but once it turns into a means to an end, and here the end is contributing more to social control, to the control of the industry, it loses its potential. And so this, according to Adorno and Horkheimer, is inherent in the principle of entertainment as a principle of bourgeois enlightenment. Entertainment for bourgeois society is indissociable from business, and business in the culture industry relies on the capacity to make the other person agree to the deal, right? Entertainment is precisely the best way to force an agreement over a contract, and of course a social contract. Quote, the original affinity between business and entertainment reveals itself in the meaning of entertainment itself as society's apologia. To be entertained means to be in agreement. So once we are entertained, we have agreed to the status quo. So contrary to revolutionary or emancipatory amusement, entertainment is a business. It becomes an evangelical apology and a justification for the society, for society as it is. And so what it does is it removes from sight the social realities, or as they put it, entertainment insulates itself from the social process. Insulates means to isolate itself or protect itself from the social process. The social process means the social structures on which society is based and from which the conditions for your existence are created. Like in other words, if you are poor, it has nothing to do with your country's policies or the business strategies of your boss. It's just how it is. And so the only thing you can do is to try to forget your pain, and this is where entertainment comes in. Entertainment is basically a drug that numbs your pain and thought, because being aware of social realities that requires an active thinking process, but entertainment makes us stupid by making it itself stupid. Like entertainment doesn't want you to see those realities, because in order for them to be grasped, one must pay attention to details. And so entertainment is going to be only focusing on the whole, the bigger picture, and is going to lose all kinds of nuance. And it's in that sense where enlightenment, entertainment becomes stupid, because the social realities, well, they are not the whole of society, they are not the bigger picture, but they lie in small details in everyday life. Like ideologies such as fascism, they're not really displayed for everyone to see, but they can also be hidden, they can be subtle, they can be in a smile, in a gesture, in a friendly joke, etc. So enlightenment paradoxically becomes stupid because it only focuses on the whole. Always look at the bigger picture. And so whenever you see violence right in front of you, you are encouraged to see this as a trivial act, something to read about in the newspapers, in the faits divers, which means some trivial stories that that you just read in the news and you just forget about it. So you are told not to think about violence, but to focus on the bigger things that matter in life, the kind of things that you see on the screen in pop music, like focusing on yourself and that kind of stuff, focusing on your career, on your studies, on being a better partner or stuff like that. So, as they say, amusement always means putting things out of mind, forgetting suffering, even when it is on display. At its root is powerlessness. It is indeed escape, but not, as it claims, escape from bad reality, but from the last thought of resisting that reality. So the point of the culture industry is precisely that, to make us see everything in reality trivial, to make us see everything in reality as non-important. We can get by just fine watching homelessness, poverty, racism, sexism, genocides, and so those things require thinking. They require concrete analysis. But entertainment turns things around. Thinking itself becomes tyranny against thinking. Entertainment claims to liberate from suffering, but not really like a religious leader, a guru that imposes their liberations. Rather, entertainment acts as if its liberation is free, like it is in accordance with the needs of the people. And Adorno and Horkheimer, they discuss this rhetorical question when you hear what do the people want, to illustrate this point. They say, the shamelessness of the rhetorical question, what do people want, lies in the fact that it appeals to the very people as thinking subjects whose subjectivity it specifically seeks to annul. So what this means is that, no one wants to be stupid or called stupid. So of course, entertainment cannot make its disdain for the people explicit. And so instead, it looks for subtle means to turn people into stupid creatures, into people who don't think. And so for an individual to be a thinking being, what is needed is the subjectivity of that individual, right? In thinking, I experience my subjectivity. That's why the thought of having someone else's thoughts in my in my mind is so dreadful to anyone. It represents an invasion of my freedom, right? So denying my subjectivity means denying my freedom, denying my existence as a being with dignity and control over my life, my recognition from my surrounding, etc. So being able to think means that I have a subjectivity. But the culture industry needs to find a way to shortcut this, but in a subtle way. It wants us to have the illusion that we are still, free subjects, that we have a subjectivity, but it's gonna try to make that subjectivity, like we said about emotions, inoffensive, or it's going to manufacture for us the kind of subjectivity that the culture industry wants us to have, which means that we don't have a subjectivity. So how can it annul subjectivity? How can it sustain the illusion that we are thinking subjects? Well, the answer lies in that rhetorical question. What do the people want? Basically, the culture industry is going to manufacture the needs of the people, and so whomever objects to the practices of the industry is seen as someone who is simply opposed to thinking. And so when the industry says, but that's what the people want, I ask them, right? It implies that the industry didn't shortcut the thinking process of the subject, and therefore whatever the status quo is, it must be the free choice of individuals. Whatever reality you see in front of you, with its inequalities, injustices, and all of that, since the culture industry claims that that reality was produced by the needs and the desires of the people, it is the kind of reality that resulted from their own subjectivity. So the reality is not against thinking, because it is the process of that same thinking. It is the process of your own subjectivity. So whomever is going to object to the culture industry is actually going to be the one who is objecting to subjectivity. This is gaslighting. This is gaslighting on a whole other level. So it is this democratic lure, this democratic trap of whatever the majority decides upon, without questioning the decision, without checking if there were no mistakes in the deliberation, no manipulation, etc. So if what the industry needs is just the consent or the agreement of the people, then leaving it to entertainment to decide offers it the best excuses to maintain its interests and to maintain the status quo. So it can turn the people into stupid creatures, and with their consent. But the industry is going to face a challenge, and that is it cannot afford that people become too stupid. After all, the industry relies on an endless technological progress. It is necessary that the consumers don't become too dumb to the point where they cannot even understand how to run the simple machines. Or as Adorno argues, in the age of statistics, the masses are too astute to identify with the millionaire on the screen and too obtuse to deviate even minutely from the law of large numbers. Like, people must be smart enough to avoid identifying with millionaires, but at the same time, too dumb to deviate from the ideology of statistics. And so this means that people can never question something that can be put into numbers or equations, or even something that has the label empirical study on it. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that it is the open window for all kinds of superstition or mistrust in science, which is pretty common today, and against which Adorno and Horkheimer stood very firmly. But instead, Adorno and Horkheimer, they are concerned with the dogmatism in everything that has a scientific aura, without critical analysis over the same phenomenon that it analyzes. For example, a study tells you that most crimes committed are committed by a certain ethnicity. This can be factually true, but this doesn't close the case about what to do now. Instead, critical analysis asks, why is it the case? And what method was used in that study? What is the implication of that epistemology? What ideology does it serve? Like, we don't just stop at the numbers, you know. This is and so this is the takeaway here. Do not stop at just the plain numbers. And so the illustration they give is the belief in probability calculation. As they say, fortune will not smile on all, just on the one who draws the winning ticket, or rather the one designated to do so by a higher power. Usually the entertainment industry itself, which presents itself as ceaselessly in search of talent. So this is like the time, that one time where in one of Jordan Peterson's lectures, he wanted to prove the Pareto principle to be a natural law. And so the Pareto principle is, it's also known as the 2080 law, or the 2080 rule, where they say only 20% produces the 80% of a result. Like, you know, 20% of the workplace produces 80% of the products. Now, it is of course a false principle, and the principle is everything but a natural law. But Peterson runs it by statistics and probability. He puts some input about, you know, wealth distribution in a program, in a software, and then he launches it, and progressively you see a hierarchy building up where only a small group is in control of, you know, most of the wealth. And so the point is to prove scientifically that, you know, the law of probability makes it that only a few will make it to the top, whereas most of the rest will remain mediocre. And therefore it is a necessity to make a system selection of who gets to be at the top, to give the illusion that this is all fair and not random. You know, that there are people at the top. I mean, that's just, you know, natural. That's just how things work. It is fair and it's not at all random. So the people at the bottom, they cannot complain. So this is where the experts of the industry come in, and they are the talent spotters. They go looking through, they go looking in bars and karaoke cafes, through YouTube and talent shows, who is going to be the next star. And so Adorno gives the example of the starlet who plays a secretary in a movie. Like, she must both appear like a real secretary for in case a real secretary watches the movie. That way she can maintain the belief that this can also happen to her, that she too can become a star one day if the fair system of selection, which paradoxically is related to fortune, like if the system would bless her with its neutrality and objectivity one day, but at the same time she cannot identify with the actress's glamorous life. She must know that her chances for succeeding like the actress are low. And so often movies portray secretaries as if they belong to that job, like they are made for that job. They even sexualize that job with the tropes of, you know, the hot secretary to make it seem as if she's a good fit for that position, as if the position was made for that person. So identify, but always from a distance. Like the dream is there, you know, the dream of making it to the big screen is there. It is democratic. Like no one is actively trying to stop you from trying to achieve it. But also get it through your head that the dream, even though is out there, well, it's not for you. At best, you can find some solace in the belief that you are all the same, and so if one manages to be at the top, it's like, you know, it's like you did it too. From the lowest position in the hierarchy, you also managed through someone else to get at the top. So you can find peace in the idea that your dream is being lived by someone else who was taking from the same statistical pool in which you exist. So in short, it's like the anecdote about Stalin, which is kind of anachronistic, by the way, but it serves a good representation here. When Stalin said that one death is a tragedy, but a million deaths is a statistic. Like, you have to understand that you are just a statistic. Your life or death won't be the one to make the headlines in the newspaper. You're more like, you know, to be just one among many, and that's it. Like, there is nothing special about you. But whenever you hear the success story of someone or the death of a celebrity, you are supposed to feel for them. Like, you can be glad that someone lived and died the life and death that you dreamed of. It's enough reassurance to motivate you to keep showing up at your job, to know that there are people out there who are living those lives. Quote: where the culture industry still invites naive identification, it immediately denies it. It is no longer possible to lose oneself in others. Once film spectators saw their own wedding in that of others. Now the happy couple on the screen are specimens of the same species as everyone in the audience. But the sameness posits the insuperable separation of its human elements. The perfected similarity is the absolute difference. So the consequence of this is the view that human beings as a whole are nothing but a species. Like, anyone can be replaced by anyone, and this isn't an inclusive call for celebrating equality, but rather the idea that human beings are dispensable. We can always find someone else among the pool of statistics to do your job. They become just, people become just mere specimen. Quote: as individuals, they are absolutely replaceable, pure nothingness, and are made aware of this as soon as time deprives them of their sameness. And so another consequence, which is also the consequence of, that previous consequence of, we all become, the same, is what this ideology does to what Adorno and Horkheimer call the religion of success. Basically, the religion of success is the belief that all that matters in life is your success. If you have none by the time you kick the bucket, your life and you as an individual are worthless. It's the Latin maxim per aspera ad astra, from suffering to the stars. But he argues that there is a change in this religion once the culture industry is launched. He says that there is a shift from the focus on needs and efforts to an obsession with prizes. What is deemed successful is no longer a matter of needs and efforts that could have been a relief, but the culture industry, as we said, has the ability to turn everything that has revolutionary potential to an oppression machine. Because now the culture industry selects blindly who to give the prize of success to. Like music awards, for example, give prizes to some musicians without knowing why, because their music sounds like that of many others. Like it's like the machine decides randomly which song will be a hit among many songs that sound exactly the same, which, you know, like which extra will be the next heroine among this sea of sameness. Like all heroines themselves become extras. They all look alike. You cannot distinguish anyone anymore except, you know, maybe the villain. Adorno says that by imposing an essential sameness on their characters, with the exception of the villain, to the point of excluding any faces which do not conform. So we can wonder why they do that. I mean, why the villain is always the one that is not subject to sameness, so that, you know, people can easily identify them in real life. It's basically, you know, dehumanization. And it also pushes further people into conformism. The idea of standing out becomes associated with villainy. The authors mention again the actress Gardo. We mentioned her last time. So Gardo has, I mean, her face, because she always plays, you know, melancholic and sad roles. Her face doesn't really conform to the stereotype of the smiling and submissive woman. You know, the kind of woman who always smiles to attract, you know, the Prince Charming, the one that tells you that you can. That you can, you know, do whatever you want, and is always willing to obey your orders. You know, the one who tells you that you can have her and all of that. Like, the message of the culture industry is therefore to stay as you are, and we will make the world fitting for your demands. The patriarchal society in question relies on the industry to turn women into the best fit for the male desire. So the culture industry is therefore saying no need for anyone to do anything. Everything will eventually come your way. No need to change, no need to fight. Just let it be the way that it is. If it comes your way, then it was just meant to be. You cannot force fate, right? It's up to fortune to decide who gets to live the dream, but you all have the same equal chances to be selected. Quote, they are assured that they do not need to be in any way other than they are, and that they can succeed just as well without having to perform tasks of which they know themselves incapable. They're talking about you know, the general public here. But at the same time, they are giving the hint that effort would not help them in any case, because even bourgeois success no longer has any connection to the calculable effect of their own work. So here we fall into the double bind of the culture industry. On the one hand, it rationalizes everything. Like we said with the example of the secretary, she's portrayed as if the job was made specifically for her, but at the same time, we can all become whatever we want. So on the one hand, you have this idea that everyone can be anything since everything is rationalized, but on the other, it is also up to chance to make you whatever it is we need in society. Like nowadays, everyone can become an engineer or a manager. These are rational functions like everything else in the world. All valuable work is valuable insofar as anyone can do it, given that they receive the proper training. But at the same time, it is the culture industry that randomly picks who gets to be one, or even who gets to be the successful engineer or the successful manager. Like the functions are rationalized to the maximum, but the process to who should do those jobs is left to irrational powers, to, you know, fortune. So in other words, chance and planning become one and the same thing. And in such worldview, the economic conditions or backgrounds of people no longer matter. When we talked about the religion of success, when it was based on need and effort, for example, Adorno wasn't celebrating that. He wasn't saying that that back then, when you work hard, you succeeded. Rather, his idea of efforts and needs are social. Like we need to make efforts collectively in order to change the status quo, in order to bring about the revolution. You know, like it won't happen on its own, right? But this requires that the economic conditions of people are acknowledged, that people's needs and desires and interests, their motivation, their potential, don't fall from the sky with the religion of which is what the religion of success argues. And so instead, Adorno urges us to understand that our condition is not the factor of chance like the culture industry presents. Again, in the concept of enlightenment, we said that the idea of fortune has some counter-enlightenment power, but here chance means that your situation has nothing to do with the economic system, with the patriarchy, with white supremacy, with colonialism, etc. For the industry, none of those things matter. Even revolutionary speeches won't do anything. You hear all of these philosophers talking about revolution and changing the world through collective efforts. Forget all about that. There is only chance that can do anything, and that's the takeaway of the culture industry. Okay? So in short, the culture industry gets to a point where it plans chance. The planners basically tell people to believe in chance's control. So this offers some reassurance to people. They're always tired that everything is always planned, right? So with the belief in chance, they can have the illusion that the tables can turn at any moment, which provides the ability for the planners to do what they want, right? It's again the principle of castration. Once you accept to be one among the many, you will have an equal chance at happiness and at success. There is still an open window for freedom, dreams, and spontaneity, and so your subjectivity is safe once you give in to the culture industry. So the basis of chance, therefore, is powerlessness, which according to Adorno and Horkheimer, this powerlessness disguised as freedom is reflected in, quote, the arbitrary selection of average cases. In the detailed reports on the modesty luxurious pleasure trip organized by the magazine for the lucky competition winner, preferably a shorthand typist who probably won through contacts with the local powers that be, the powerlessness of everyone is reflected. So, like with the myth of the tragic hero, which we mentioned in the concept of enlightenment, everyone is driven by fate. They can never break free from the powers that hold them. Nothing about them, neither justice nor labor, has any meaning for the industry. In the culture industry, that power takes the form of a contract between either employer or employee or buyer and consumer. And so, as Adorno argues, the industry reduces the whole of humanity as just people who are in a contractual relationship between a boss and an employee. And so what this means is that planning is denied to the employee. They can only rely on the decisions of the employer about labor, about production, about technology, about organization, etc. And they can also decide what kind of emphasis to put forth, like what ideological tool would serve to justify those choices. So the employer can choose either planning or chance. They can say we will do it like this because we are rationally sure about this plan, or because there's nothing to do, like it's not up to us. They can also choose if this is only natural or for the sake of civilization, or it can put forth values like it's for the sake of life, or it's for the sake of technological progress, or whatever. And whenever the employees who are left out, when they feel their status as objects is becoming apparent, the relationship switches to buyer and consumers. The employee becomes now the consumer who is satisfied with the products offered by the industry as exchange for their compliance. The employee is giving the illusion that he is special and different, like he is an active agent in society, through this contract between buyer and consumer, through consumerism, basically. So getting a movie theater is seen by the consumer as a win, like the consumer got what he wanted from the buyer. And so the consumer, because of that rhetorical question, feels the rhetorical question, what do the people want? The consumer feels like he is in charge when asked what people want, and then he sees a movie theater opening its doors. The consumer says, I want that, thinking that the door opened because of his needs and will. And so whether they are employees or consumers, workers or consumers, it is never up to them to decide what is in their best interests. As Adorno and Horkheimer say, as employees, people are reminded of the rational organization and must fit into it as common sense requires. As customers, they are regaled, whether on the screen or in the press, with human interest stories demonstrating freedom of choice and the charm of not belonging to the system. In both cases, they remain objects. And so, following this, Adorno and Horkheimer turn to the subject of abstraction. You can already check the videos I made about Hegel's text, Who Thinks Abstractly, in which I explained that an abstraction is when you reduce something to such a degree that it loses all continence, like something becomes just an idea floating in the sky, an image or a stereotype. And so reducing someone to an object is an abstraction, since you remove from sight the most important features that make that person who they are, as you know, a thinking subject with a subjectivity. But Adorno and Horkheimer, they highlight that this process of reducing someone to an abstraction isn't limited to human beings, but you can actually do this with everything. Everything becomes an abstraction. Everything is dissolved into that pure nothingness, like we said earlier about robbing people of their subjectivity. Now everything is losing its continence. Everything becomes empty, like an empty vessel in which you can put your ideology. Like, in other words, everything becomes a vessel for your ideology, since what constituted a possible resistance to it was removed from people, things and even ideas. So, like when you look at when you watch a movie, you are just taken by a flow of images that paint a narrative of how life should go, but the narrative is so unclear, so simplistic, not really unclear, but let's say so general, so simplistic and abstract, that it doesn't make sense anymore. Once you just think about most plots that you see that you watch in movies. So the less the culture industry promises, like the less things we need to consider in life, the explanation for life becomes more meaningless. Everything is now, infected with meaninglessness, and this affects ideas and language. Like you deprive life, like this is how what the media does, like this is what cinema does, according to Adorno and Horkheimer. It's like they simplify life so much, they simplify existence so much that life itself becomes meaningless, because it has been emptied of everything that makes life valuable. And so this also affects our language and ideas. Even our language will become a reflection of a life that is so empty, that is so meaningless. So ideas such as harmony and benevolence are deemed too concrete, despite being abstract idea by the culture industry. They need to dissolve even more so that no meaning can be ascribed to them. What harmony is, what reality it should embody, becomes whatever the culture industry decides on. Like, words lose their meaning, and it is the culture industry that now decides what counts as harmony, what counts as benevolence. Whatever form of harmony is marketable will become harmony. The kind of benevolence that allows us to make more money, like philanthropy, for example, which solves nothing of the problems it claims to solve, as long as it makes a profit, we will say that that's benevolence. Whenever someone talks about harmony in society, if the harmony he refers to isn't to allow the culture industry to gain further power, then it's not harmony. And so likewise, words themselves lose all of their meaning. If they cannot be used for advertisement, they have no reason to be used. All that is allowed is a language that can be a means for the goals of the culture industry. So whenever you speak, the culture industry wants your words to reflect its own ideology, to reenact the totality of enlightenment. And as such, words and languages are reduced to advertisement devices. Even abstractions become such devices. In philosophical terms, an abstraction is anything but an abstraction. Like it's a metaphysical concept that supposedly captures the essence of things without reducing them. But here, with the culture industry, abstractions become themselves, well, abstractions. They become abstract. And so they only serve the goal of advertisement. And as such, notions like truth, for example, become no existence. At best, truth becomes fiction and untruth, like we said in previous videos. Language which appeals to mere truth only arouses impatience to get down to the real business behind it. Words which are not a means seem meaningless. The others seem to be fiction, untruth. Value judgments are perceived either as advertisement or as mere chatter. So not even morality or aesthetics can cut it. To say that something is good or beautiful serves no purpose other than determining if we can put a price on it, if we can, market that something that is good or beautiful. So there is nothing concrete anymore in the culture industry. You cannot, grab on something in there. There is no meaning anymore. Everything simply becomes vague. The signature of the culture industry is precisely that. It is vagueness. Being vague, the culture industry itself even disappears from sight, kind of like, the vagueness of God. You can neither prove it exists nor that it doesn't exist. Everything from it has control over us because it escapes all attempts to control it back. And so this again, this is another misconception about the Frankfurt School. We think that they are against objectivity or science, but not at all. They have nothing against the scientific method. They say that the culture industry, the result of enlightenment, is not even scientific because you cannot even apply the standards of science to it. By this we mean that you cannot verify if anything coming from the culture industry is actually true. And so they say its very vagueness, the quasi-scientific reluctance to be pinned down to anything which cannot be verified, functions as an instrument of control. Ideology becomes the emphatic and systematic proclamation of what is. So, if anything, the culture industry makes science obsolete. Adorno and Horkheimer are not attacking science. They say that it is the culture industry that actually attacks science, since it rejects the very notion of truth, even in its, Latin roots, veritas. The culture industry doesn't bother with verification. The only thing it needs as verification is, if the numbers go up. Therefore, the idea of facts isn't really scientific when it comes from the industry. For it, a fact is just a number, either less or more, and it stops there. It stops at how the world appears to it. Whereas in science, the facts are only or should be the beginning of the discussion. And so facts for the industry are basically lies. They are meaningless and they are untrue. They are just a mere surface. And so this is what the industry reduces the world into: lies and surfaces. An ideal world of abstraction, this is what the industry wants. An ideal world of abstractions, nothing concrete. So if you dare say that there is beauty, for example, that there is morality, that there are metaphysics, that there are social structures, the industry says, where are the facts? Show me beauty. Show me morality, show me metaphysics, show me these social structures. And obviously you can't, since that would be like trying to prove the existence of a hyperobject like climate change or global warming to someone who denies global warming. You can check my video, my series of videos on the book Hyperobjects by Timothy Morton, which precisely addresses this issue. Like how climate change, it's something that you cannot really prove through facts, and that's why it is so hard to convince a climate change denier. This is what Timothy Morton argues in his book Hyperobjects, which I recommend. So the culture industry has homogenized the world, It became, you know, the deity that decides on its own what is the nature of reality, of what is the just, what is the beautiful. And so, you know, the three main questions in philosophy are, you know, what is real or what is true, what is the beautiful, and what is the just. So what is, you know, reality, what is beauty, and what is justice. These are basically the three main big questions in philosophy. And so the culture industry doesn't even answer. It doesn't even say nothing is real or nothing is beautiful or nothing is just. It just says, wrong question, there's only one question, does it increase my numbers? And so if the answer is no, then whatever it is you brought is devaluated, ignored, forgotten, just superstition. It presents itself as the most, you know, impartial, it's the culture industry. It presents itself as the most impartial judge, since it claims of imposing nothing of the sort. It doesn't have the audacity to say that this is the real, this is the beautiful, or this is the just, but it leaves it to the consumers to decide. And so whatever doesn't shine must comply with the rules, otherwise it becomes a tyrant. Society doesn't tolerate tyrants, and as punishment, they will suffer the fate that all tyrants fear, losing all relevance and power. And as such, by opposing the culture industry, you have achieved faster the state where everyone is being led to, a state of irrelevance and powerlessness. Quote, one has only the choice of conforming or being consigned to the backwoods. The provincials who oppose cinema and radio by falling back on eternal beauty and amateur theatricals have already reached the political stance toward which the members of class society are still being driven. And that political stance is the stance of irrelevance, powerlessness, and insignificance. In other words, what the industry does, again, is teaching gaslighting. Like, if you are objective, the culture industry calls you subjective. When you are subjective, the industry doesn't take you seriously because you are not objective. When you bring in facts, the industry accuses you of being ideological. When you bring in emotions and feelings, the industry says that you are also driven by ideology. So there is no possible winning because there is nothing outside the industry, according to the industry. Like, even criticizing the industry becomes part of the industry. The system, you know, can turn the attacks against it into a profit. It can sell tickets to speeches and organize debates about how to destroy the culture industry. Like, it doesn't care. It doesn't give a shit. Like the moviegoers who go to the movies to watch the live they want just on display, to see the movie that takes place in Venice, to live for a moment their dream, to go there. The people who attend, you know, conferences and debates about the fall of capitalism are doing the same thing. They just want to see their fantasy. They just want to see their fantasy being on display. And so the culture industry won't really allow for an alternative. Whatever the future the debaters and lecturers discuss, the culture industry can offer it only through its screens. It makes that dream a reality everywhere by maintaining it at an, you know, indefinite distance, which means that it doesn't turn into a reality at all. But that's what you have to pay. You know, like, if you want to see that dream, if you want to see the dream of, you know, a just and good society, if you want to see that dream turn into a reality, you have to actually give up on that dream being possible to turn into a reality. So Adorno and Horkheimer, they give the example of an American woman who goes see a movie about the life in Paris. She dreams to live there, but the more she dreams of a life in Paris, the more pushed she is towards the American boy that she can find where she is right now. Like, the life in Paris is like the revolution that the debaters talk about. Its purpose through the culture industry is just to push us back to the culture industry, to find like-minded people with whom we can keep talking about the revolution, but never actually bringing it up. So bringing it about. So the system creates the lives of the consumers, even those who want to break free from it. Like, you know, the culture industry even, you know, provides you with the narrative of breaking free of the culture industry. You know, you want to be a revolutionary, well, the culture industry can provide you with the narrative to be a revolutionary. And so everything you throw at the culture industry only strengthens its ability to reproduce itself. And this ability becomes the very reason why we throw things at it. Like the omnipotence of the culture industry becomes therefore its own reason for being, you know, its own, its sole raison d'être. And so the industry exists simply because it can. It does things simply because it can do them. The ability to keep going at all becomes the justification for the blind continuation of the system, indeed for its immutability. What is repeated is healthy, the cycle in nature as in industry. So the nature of the industry is therefore cyclical. Everything in it runs in circles, and at each turn the cycle becomes more immutable. The circumstances of the present seem more and more to be eternal. Like the movie Adorno and Horkheimer mentioned, the Charlie Chaplin movie about Hitler, the dictator. It's a famous speech about, you know, freedom, and the ending with, you know, Chaplin walking into the swaying fields are part of the same cycle that, you know, produces fascism. It served the lie about freedom of speech to anti-fascists. Like the culture industry's power lies in its unification of antithesis, of thesis and antithesis, in its ability of producing synthesis, of never letting things be independent of, you know, things being themselves. They all must conform. Fascism and anti-fascism become one and the same coin because the industry forces them to be, you know, like it forced nature and society to synthesize by subjugating one to the other, and also vice versa. So society, like we explained in the concept of enlightenment, dominated nature, and as such it brought the domination of nature upon itself. So only in human civilization, the laws of nature, the laws of the jungle, have been unleashed to their fullest potential. And so, as Adorno says, the solemn pictorial affirmation that the trees are green, the sky is blue, and the clouds are sailing overhead already makes them cryptograms for factory chimneys and gasoline stations. Conversely, wheels and machines parts are made to gleam expressively, debased as receptacles of that leafy, cloudy soul. So, whenever someone looks at nature in the culture industry, what one is supposed to see are cryptograms for factories. A cryptogram is a coded message. Like when you see a landscape, you must see the numbers and equations that make both the natural landscape and the chain of factories the same thing, as if one is just the extension of the other or a rearrangement of the other. And so nature and technology become to be seen as sharing the same DNA, if you will. And as such, they become both the solution to all problems of liberal society. Like, you know, the same logic that from nature you get to the factory is also the same logic that from the factory you get to nature. And so nature becomes like leisure. It becomes a continuation of the factory, like leisure. When we talked about leisure in, I think, the second section of the culture industry, like leisure is the continuation of work. And so you see this in when people go to nature to, you know, to relax, to forget about their stress and forget about their work, or when the upper classes go to excursions to forget about their boredom. Or as in the case that Adorno gives, they go to the beach and take open air baths, quote. In this way, both nature and technology are mobilized against the alleged stuffiness, the faked recollection of liberal society as a world in which people idled lavishly in plush-lined rooms instead of taking wholesome open air baths as they do today, or suffered breakdowns in antediluvian Benz models instead of traveling at rocket speed from where they are, in any case, to where it is no different. So in short, liberalism has brought in a society of stuffiness. Stuffiness means, like, you know, a suffocating atmosphere because of lack of airflow or ventilation. You feel stuffed, like for example during summer in closed rooms or in attics. Like it here refers to the fact that with liberalism, many people found themselves bored to death, as they just, you know, waste time in lined plush rooms, the kind of rooms where bourgeois people would just, you know, they just be bourgeois and bored. Like those rooms were only possible through the further domination of technology over nature. Like to produce plush, which is a fabric that keeps heat, and as such. At such a large scale, for it to be present in everyday home, you actually need a lot of factories. So nature was dominated by factories from which plush was produced, and that led to people feeling isolated and bored in stuffed rooms, and so they used the same technology to leave those rooms and return to nature to take, you know, open air baths. They go to nature with their cars, and nowadays with their, you know, phones to take a few selfies and complain when they have to walk a mile. Or there is the second example with people who go through, you know, breakdowns in their fancy cars. Like that's what the whatever Benz is. It's a fancy car. And so again, the logic from nature to the factory produced the cars in which the liberal society cries due to burnouts and love dramas. And so they reverse the logic, taking their cars to travel quickly back to nature to make a trip to a lake or whatever. But as Adorno and Horkheimer say, from where they are to where they are going, there is no difference. So whenever you hear people praising the importance of nature, and that is, you know, important that you go meditate once in a while in your garden, it's also part of the culture industry. It just gives people the sense that they are now awake, that they are not like the rest of the sheep flock, that now they know the things that matter, and now because they've been to a yoga session in the woods, they have achieved the real and true goal of being a liberal individual. You know, the arrogance of people who pretend to be awakened because they hate technology, like the hippies, and they claim to live freely. Like that's what we are talking about here. When the technology takes over nature, we celebrate saying that technology is the perpetuity of nature, and when nature takes over, we celebrate that, saying that nature is the perpetuity of technology. Kind of like, you know, Adorno says about the triumph of giant corporation over entrepreneurial initiative. Quote, "The triumph of the giant corporation over entrepreneurial initiative is celebrated by the culture industry as the perpetuity of entrepreneurial initiative." So the point is that the alleged triumph, that this, you know, mobilization of both nature and technology against the alienation in question, is a mobilization against a dead horse. You know the expression beating a dead horse? It means to waste time and effort trying to do something that is impossible, or in this case meaningless, because liberalism, the image of because of liberalism, the image of the liberal society is already dead, like it has defeated itself. And all of this, as Adorno says, is a fight against a corpse. Quote, "The fight is waged against an enemy who has already been defeated, the thinking subject." So in the 1944 edition, the enemy was liberalism, which in 1947 was replaced by the thinking subject. Both the ideal of liberalism and the thinking subject were already defeated, and now we are just fighting over and against a ghost. Like even the culture industry fights against an enemy that was already defeated. The culture industry simply pretends that there is resistance to it. It maintains the illusion that people are still thinking subjects, that the promises of liberalism are still possible, and that they are right around the corner. But this is simply done so that the industry keeps working. It brings back, you know, the thinking subject and the promise of liberalism from the grave, just to make it seem that there are still things to hope for, so that people, you know, go watch their dumb movies. I mean, this is why all of this is being done, you know. But in the end, only the industry creates the subject and its enemies, the anti-fascists and the fascists. Both of them come from the same factory. As Adorno says at the end of the section, the resurrection of I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm not even gonna try, the enemy of bourgeois Philistines in Germany at the smoke coziness of life with father have one and the same meaning. So that name that I cannot pronounce is about a play by a German playwright called Paul Appel. It's about a rebel against the bourgeois order, while the other reference, Life with Father, is also a play adapted from the autobiography of a guy named Clarence Day. And it's like, the typical representation of bourgeois lifestyle, so exactly what the first play should stand against. So what he says is that both plays have one and the same meaning, even though both plays, they are basically opposed to each other. One is about, rebellion against the bourgeois order, and the other is a typical representation of the bourgeois order. So what Adorno and Horkheimer are saying is that both are produced, both are the product of the same culture industry. And so this is what they mean when they say that everything is the same, is that when you have something, even its opposition is actually produced by the same principle that produced the first thing. And so this is how they end this fourth section. And next week we will do a close reading of the fifth one, and in which they are going to dive into greater details about this idea of making everything the same, and in which one thing and its opposition are actually produced by the same principle, and so the distinction between them is just superficial, and there's nothing really different about them, and this is how the culture industry maintains its power. All right, so that's it for today. I hope that you found this helpful, and it helps you understand and better read the book. Hopefully you find it easier to read the books after you watch these videos. And as always, thank you for watching, and